Bob here. I'm reaching out to see if the current apocalypse measures up to the ones in our youth.
Oh, nostalgia for Doomsday? Well, I never.
Could pop culture have been so wrong?
Recorded high atop my beautiful compound in New Zealand. It's the Welcome to the End Variety Show, starring Rob Stevens.
Apocalypse? In this economy? Oh my.
I think I've been having very mixed feelings about it's been like hard to separate my body shutting down and the quarantine at the same time.
Yeah. Canada has decided to put off second doses to get as many first doses in people's arms. I love your bunker.
So I guess we're going to go ahead and start. Hi, Diane. What's your last name now? Diane Bradley?
I still go by Diane Bradley, yeah. My legal name is different, but it's long and crazy. Yes. So Diane Bradley is my nom de plume.
Okay, fantastic. and you work in animation?
Animation, pretty much, yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah. Well, welcome to my underground bunker in New Zealand.
Thank you for having me.
I'd
be lost without you.
Oh, thanks. Growing up, being obsessed with the end of the world, killer bees, solar flare, Mayan Apocalypse.
I'm in Murder Hornet Ground Zero up here in Vancouver.
Oh, a Murder Hornet. That is amazing. But of course, I think there actually are Murder Hornets. I don't know.
There are Murder Hornets up here. But the thing about Vancouver and the Pacific Northwest in general is that everyone is very nature conscious. Like everyone really wants to preserve because it's beautiful up here. And so there's a lot of we have a lot of protesters getting arrested right now trying to protect old growth forests. We have to save our beloved bees. Nobody likes the Murder Hornets.
I'm so concerned about these bees.
Yeah.
But what about these bees?
When I was growing up, as a child, the apocalypse to me was one that was just always pervasive, was nuclear holocaust. And I was a little, because the probably the earliest memory was the day after that movie. I didn't watch it. I don't think my mother would let me watch it because she thought it was too scary.
Yeah.
But I did see the clips where it was people are like, look, and then, instantly turn to skeletons and stuff. And to me, the thought of nuclear holocaust as something to be afraid of, I didn't want it to happen, but at the same time, I was kind of well, so my options are I'm going to die with everybody else. And if you think about what death means and stuff, if I'm going to be gone in a millisecond, that millisecond, I think there was a little fear that was going to be a really painful millisecond, but it was still going to be a millisecond. And so it couldn't be that bad. How much experience would I have? And then the other fear of death is that you're going to leave someone behind who's going to be in pain. But if everybody's going
all at once, yeah.
All at once. And so really, I think as an aspiring artist or someone who dreamed of being an artist, it would be no one's gonna, all that's going to be lost. Everything that has meaning is going to be lost. And and that's still something that I struggle with a little bit. It's I work so hard and what I'm doing means so much to me, but at some point this is going to be space junk. I don't know why that sort of sticks out, but if you think about someone has a lovely bunker like yours and might survive, it didn't seem like a really what am I going to do? Because you'd have to live under there probably for the rest of your life and be a broodmare for humanity. Who wants that?
Agreed. I was very focused on either living in being sick and having my fingernails falling out and hair falling out. And
oh, you thought you were going to last? I think for as long as the Cold War was really a fear, we had to read on the beach. Everybody went to Australia and I was all right, well, if I don't go to Australia, I'm toast. So I just was very accepting of it. I was more sort of focused on okay, well, let's make sure that doesn't happen then. If I got some living to do, then I'm not going to worry about something happening that's beyond my control. But also, this probably will come up later too, but one of the themes of apocalypse is that there is, for a lot of people, a lot of these thoughts are rooted in the fact that people want to believe that they'll be one of the survivors.
Exactly.
And I don't. Most people are not going to be one of the survivors. You either have to have a lot of money, a lot of military training, a lot of physical fitness.
I know. It seems like a drag.
Or just be or a lot of luck. 3 out of 4 of those things I don't have. I might have some luck, but.
And you were saying a little bit about Y2K? Was that something?
Y2K, yeah, that was the only like apocalypse thing. The only like apocalypse that I really kind of bought into at all. I remember at one point I was having a conversation with one of your old roommates and my old roommates as well, Matt.
Ooh.
He went on this big super virus spiel. Do you remember the big super virus spiel he went on?
I remember that he had very strong opinions about Police Academy movie. He didn't like the gay bar scene because he's like, that would be terrifying if I was forced to do the tango. I don't remember the super virus.
No one was forcing him to do any tangos.
I don't think so either.
He gave me a big spiel about that was a super virus event that was a little more like The Stand in nature. When Matt talked to me about it, he was sort of like, no, mathematically, this is going to happen. Y2K was something that seemed reasonable. It seemed like it was sort of rooted in, and like, I had read a couple books about it. It didn't seem like it was necessarily going to be an apocalypse to me, but it certainly seemed like it was something that could cause a big hiccup. My godmother was a systems analyst for Xerox for years and years and years. And she didn't seem too bent out of shape about it, but she was like, oh yeah, I remember like us coding in like the 70s and the 80s and, you know, just doing the 2 numbers for the year and being like, what's going to happen in the year 2000? And everyone was like, I don't know. And then they were just like, blah, blah, blah. So I'm guessing that she just assumed, like they all just assumed that everything they were doing would be obsolete by then, which I think is what happened and why Y2K wasn't a thing. But I bought a couple extra bottles of water.
I remember it was really big when I was living in Columbus. And I was working in this cruddy newsstand where I don't know. Mostly we sold, like they had all these magazines, poetry magazines and stuff, but then they'd have like crosswords, magazines, and like jugs or porno magazines.
Yeah,
were really how they made their living mostly. But there were a lot of survivalist kind of intentional community type of thought, and I remember going, oh yeah. Community is the way to go. Like, I should live in a geodesic dome and, have this orgy of buying all these things like water.
Yeah.
So it was an excuse for a lot of people to buy a lot of things, I think.
During that time, I was also on like a bit of a jag of reading books about shipwrecks and people surviving, that kind of thing. I just had like a very morbid curiosity about that. And one of the ones that the one that kind of kicked it off for me was the In the Heart of the Sea by Nathaniel Philbrick, that was about the whaleship Essex, which is the boat that Moby Dick was based on.
I should look that up.
Yeah, the whaleship Essex was stove by a whale. And that was the easiest part of what happened. After that, the survivors all went into lifeboats, and there was a lot of law of the sea, which, if you know what that is, that means, we're going to draw lots. When they run out of water, there's always like, do we drink the seawater? And it's like, never drink the seawater. Y'all, anyone who's watching this, don't drink the seawater because that's the fastest way to go down. You can live for a very, very, very long time without eating, but you will not last very long without water. or shelter. So if you have to choose between the three, food should be last on the list. Water number 1, shelter number 2, food number 3. So I bought a couple of extra bottles of water at Y2K and woke up the next morning after I had gone to the bar, because I still went to the bar that night. 1984. Little 12-year-old Diane Bradley is growing up in Luzerne County, Pennsylvania. So Night of the Comet is the movie that I'm thinking about. And that movie is, just to give a quick rundown, it's about these two sisters who managed to survive a comet coming to Earth. You can see behind me the aftermath of the comet. Everyone who went outside to be like, look, a comet, is turned to dust immediately. People who have partial exposure become zombies flesh-eating zombies who will eventually degenerate. And if you were lucky enough to be behind a steel enclosure, you survive this. So our heroines are a couple of sisters named Reg and Sam. And Reg survives because she is in the projection room having premarital sex.
It's what I love is the worker who's playing video games and kind of like being a slack ass. Like the two people who survive this,
right,
are basically the people who don't like Comet. I don't give a fuck about saying that, or like I'm gonna have sex with my boyfriend, and
yes, and they're doing all of the things that like as a young woman growing up as an Irish Catholic, I was not allowed to do. And like
the good life.
Well, yeah, I mean, they were sister Sam, the younger sister, she's blonde and she's bratty and she's a cheerleader. They have like this horrible stepmom that's cheating.
They slapped her stepmom. I remember that.
Yeah, they're both very defiant to this stepmom, and she didn't really have any redeeming quality. They're like, this was not a sensitive character. The two of them, they find themselves in this apocalypse, and there's definitely moments where they're sad when they realize, I'm never going to see this guy I had a crush on and stuff. And I mean, they still have the exact same concerns after the apocalypse that they had before, which is like boys and stuff like this. But there is a sequence that I was obsessed with as a young woman, and that is they go to the mall. Like at some point they're feeling really blue and they're like, the stores are open, and they go to the mall and they take everything and they dance around. The girls just want to have fun, not the Cyndi Lauper version because that was too expensive and they couldn't clear it. But it's like, and that was like the first time I ever thought of the apocalypse as something that could be aspirational. As a young woman, the mall was, we had, and in Luzerne County, Pennsylvania, the Wyoming Valley Mall, that if you grew up in a small town, this was like, you didn't have a museum. Big concerts didn't really come to town. There just wasn't a lot of culture. Now, I grew up a couple hours away from New York, but you couldn't go there all the time. And so if you wanted to go somewhere that wasn't church, that wasn't school, that was someplace not home, and I was just at that age where my mom could just drop me and a friend off and we could shop and stuff. And we didn't have a lot of money, so I couldn't buy everything. But like just going to the record store and looking at the cover art on albums, or going to the bookstore and stuff, like that was all the culture that I could consume. And so the thought of being like, okay, well, it's very sad that everyone in my life is gone, but at the same time, what a fantasy it would be to be in the mall and you could just have whatever you want and you didn't have to worry about not having money, because money doesn't mean anything anymore. Everyone who's like busting my balls at school, whatever and stuff, they're all gone and I'm just free to do whatever and stuff. This is sort of where it ties into The Walking Dead to me, because I think there are a lot of people that are fans of that show that see it kind of in the same way as Aspirational. The whole "if Daryl dies, we riot" thing is because there's a lot of people that want to be him. He was somebody who's kind of a loser and didn't really have much of a life, and then the apocalypse happens, and he's this magical warrior, and he's so cool, and he rides a motorcycle, and he can kill everything. It's a fantasy because people don't have the ability. There are also people who maybe do have the ability to make changes in their lives, be a different person and reinvent themselves, but they're afraid to do it. And having the apocalypse happen, it becomes a thing where it's not your choice anymore. It reshuffles the deck.
I agree with you about the mall. Like, there wasn't much public space for teenagers, and now they have like TikTok and whatever, Snapchat. Like, there's the internet that they could not be looked at. But the mall was sort of like the privacy. If you
that mall was so cool. I was like, just thinking about this and knowing that we were going to talk, I was like chatting with some of my friends from high school about their memories of it, and I was like, wasn't our mall dark? Or because malls today, the ones that have lasted, and that's another thing, like one of the biggest victims of this apocalypse has been
the mall. Yeah.
The mall. Collin Creek Mall is gone now. It's gone. God. It is not there anymore. It is becoming apartments. They tore it down last year.
It's such an interesting experience to see that like malls kind of age and decay.
Yeah.
When they're sort of meant to be kind of like this utopian future marketplace in a way.
The ones that have lasted are still very much that. Modern malls now are very light and bright and stuff. But the Wyoming Valley Mall in the 70s and 80s was dark as shit. And I was like talking to my friends from high school. I was like, wasn't it dark as hell in there? And I tried to find some old pictures, and basically it was like can lights, can incandescents, and neon. All of the light was spilling in from all the different stores and the marquees outside. And there was like a big dandelion fountain in the middle of it. And I was talking to my friends, and most of the people did not remember what the fountain looked like, but everyone remembered how it smelled. It's all gone now. Like, nobody had phones. Nobody took pictures of any of it. You know, there's a little bit of video, but there just isn't a whole lot. Wyoming Valley was, it was built on the site of a mine disaster. It was like, there's, I'm laughing about it. It's very sad. People died. They had to leave columns of rock to help support the land where they were taking it. And all of the mining was underneath the whole town. And so some people would rob coal out of the columns and sell it on the side. Eventually, it collapsed. At one point, like one of them collapsed like in the middle of the Susquehanna River, and they had to like push train cars into it to block up the hole because the river was all going under because the land was so unstable. There was a girl in my school whose grandfather was one of the people that was convicted of doing that. And I remember like her family lived across from my aunt, and I remember they like all of the relatives that I had that were the generation above me and the one before were like, you know, fuck that kid. because her family, I mean, they understood that she was like a child and she didn't, this was all ancient history, all of that, but it was still, oh, play with your friend, but their family is garbage. People died because of them and the whole industry was ruined. So.
When I lived in Ohio, there was this town that had I guess it's been for 100 years or so, like an underground fire. Uh-huh. And the rumor was you could pull potatoes out of the ground and they'd be fully baked. I remember that was on like one of the postcards.
Whenever I like think about Night of the Comet, watching it again recently, it was like, oh yeah, they did have moments where they cried and they were really sad. There were a group of people that were trying to outsmart the whole thing, and they were in the bunker, and then they were like, we left the windows open, whoopsie. There's one guy that's like left alive, and his name is Hector, and he's a truck driver, and instantly they're like, well, I guess he's kind of cute. I mean, like, they were just like, and then like the younger one's like, oh, sure, you're gonna take the last guy alive or whatever. And then, yeah, once the dust clears, they're all right, we're good to go. And Reg and Hector find a couple of kids, and they immediately like go straight into like heteronormative little family where they're like taking pictures, and she's wearing like her Jessica McClintock dress and everything. And then Sam is all like wearing a blue spandex tube top, and she's gross. And then some guy pulls up in a Corvette, and she's like, later, I'm gonna be skis for life. Obsessed like a little while ago with all these mid-century prints of little children crying, like paintings of little children that are just crying. And there was one in particular that there was an urban legend that it was cursed because a fireman in England kept finding all these houses would burn down. In several of these homes, there would be a print on the ground, and it was the only thing that survived the fire. It was like everything is gone except for this painting of this child that was crying. And so this reporter went to run down the story, and it turned out that everything, the whole print, and it was made out of flame retardant material except the string that you would hang it on the wall. So the string would burn, it would fall face down on the ground, and it would survive the fire because it was.
That's amazing. I love that. All right, this has been very helpful.
Good.
And like I said,
it's been fun.
It has been fun.
I'm really interested to hear what other people have to say, like because as soon as you like brought this up, I was like, I very specifically, like, Night of the Comet is the one thing that like set it off for me. It ties in so much. The movie doesn't get enough credit. It's so cheesy, but a very specific take and a female-centric. At the time, I really connected with those characters a lot in the way that I think a lot of people now connect to the zombie apocalypse characters.
So she kept getting obsessed that all of the birds were like following her.
Beheadrun and stuff, yeah.
Oh no, poor Tippy. She got the bad end of the beak.